This presentation will focus on the updated Policy and Administrative Regulation 236, which is directly related to positive behavior supports for students receiving special education services. Throughout this presentation, you will be hearing from several team members listed here: Megan Schaefer, Assistant to the Superintendent for District Administration, Kimberly Frazier, Director of Student Services and Special Education, and 3 of our 4 special education supervisors, Melissa Sanapi-Gibson, Gwen Nardowitz, and Jason Stroop. This presentation was originally set to be delivered via a Zoom meeting in February that had to be abruptly ended at that time. So we are providing this as a recording so that it is easily accessible for family and community members. Throughout this presentation, we're going to talk about the importance of this policy and administrative regulation as it relates to positive behavior supports for students receiving special education services. We'll provide a background on the policy development. We'll do an overview of the updated Policy and Administrative Regulations 236, and we'll talk a little bit about how we have put this into action since the beginning of the year. It is important to note as we're starting out this presentation that this is a very important policy, and it is our collective responsibility to ensuring that all children are educated in learning environments that are safe and supportive and responsive to each student's individualized needs. This isn't just about the special education team, it's about all team members as we work to support students with disabilities. Positive behavior support is an integral part of educational programming. It provides a structured, proactive approach to teaching appropriate behaviors, reducing disruptive behaviors that can hinder learning, and it allows us to create more inclusive classroom environments where students with disabilities can access their education effectively. This ultimately improves their academic and social-emotional outcomes. Policy 236 is actually specific to supporting students with disabilities, but it does have connections to other district policies that impact all students, such as Policy 235, Student Rights and Responsibilities. It's important as you're listening to this presentation that you keep in mind that specific supports and services are highly individualized and are based on each student's individual strengths and needs. A student's IEP, Individualized Education Plan, provides the specific details about what accommodations and supports are provided related to positive behavioral supports and how those services are delivered specific to each individual student. If a family has questions about what's being provided to their child, they would direct those questions first to the student's special education case manager. Other resources for support would be the building level administrator that helps support the family, and also the special education supervisor of the appropriate grade band. There are a lot of ways that Policy 236 are critically important for our students receiving special education services. It is a useful guide for all of our team members. Again, the work that we do supporting our students with disabilities is not just about what the special education team does, but it is also about the work of all of our other staff members across all settings, as well as intended to be a useful guide for our families as well. The policy needed to be reflective of a wide range of student needs. Within our students that are receiving special education supports and services, the needs vary by each individual student, and so the policy itself needed to be able to be reflective of that wide range of student needs. We also know that behavioral needs will always be present. What we do before the behavior occurs is just as important as how we respond once the behaviors occur. So we were mindful of that in the development of the policy as well. We were also mindful to incorporate tiers of intervention, moving from least restrictive interventions to more restrictive interventions, addressing the emotional and social components of behavior. And it was also important throughout the policy development to think about emphasizing the importance of student privacy and the protection of each child's dignity. I want to take a minute to make sure that we recognize our partnership with the Committee for Special Education. We are really proud of the final product with this policy and administrative regulations. And there was a great deal of collaboration that led to that positive product. It's important to pause and acknowledge that partnership, and also for our team to really express a deep gratitude for the Committee for Special Education and the leadership of the Committee for Special Education. We really were true partners throughout this work, and as a result, we believe we have a better product in the end that directly supports our students. There can be information found about the Committee for Special Education on the district's website and also at Lower Merion Committee for Special Education website. The addresses are listed here.
If you're not familiar with the work of the Policy Committee, it's a subcommittee of our Board of School Directors that meets monthly. And one of the primary roles of a school board, is to develop policy for the administration, for the staff, and for our community. So a subcommittee, like I said, meets monthly and reviews the policies that we currently have and considers new policies as needs change, laws change, etc. All of our policies are found on our district website under the About tab. So if you haven't checked that out, that's a place to go to see the complete repository of our policies. And typically policies are developed because we either have a legal obligation to have a policy, or it's a memorializing an important practice or value of the district. And a lot of these policies are also common across the state. So the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, for example, develops a library of recommended policies. So you'll find from school district to school district a lot of similar policies. And there are some that change and have local flavor to reflect the values and intent and perhaps staffing or resources of a particular district. An administrative regulation, you'll find with our policies, many of them have an associated administrative regulation. The administrative regulation typically outlines in greater detail how we intend to operationalize a policy. So while the policy itself is often set as like a vision statement or a statement of intent that may be more overarching, the administrative regulations are where you're going to find the details and how we intend to operationalize them. We also have things like handbooks and other guidance documents that you can find that should also be aligned with our policy and administrative regulations, but those aren't typically reviewed at the board level. So our policies are board approved. Our administrative regulations do not technically get board approval, but they are always reviewed alongside of the policies that are being adopted by our board. So as I said, our policy committee meets monthly throughout the school year. And in this case, I'll just focus in on policy 236, is in many ways a compliance document. So there are many features of this policy and administrative regulation that are driven by legal requirements under the IDEA, Section 504 in the Pennsylvania School Code. So you'll find, while they're not all cited as legal requirements, you'll find that this is intended to be a document that is compliant with federal and state laws. What you might see, and what many districts attempt to do, especially with the support of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, is make the language accessible, make it user-friendly. We want to make sure that this guidance is localized, it's understood in accordance with our practices, and we want to make it a user-friendly tool from the standpoint of not only our staff, but our families and our students. So when we think about how do we write the document or improve upon it, often we're thinking about it from that lens. So another reason, as Kimberly mentioned, we're going to talk about changes that have happened that give us reason to take a look at this policy. We also know language changes over time, roles change over time. So when we dig into a policy that it's been a few years since we did an overhaul, those are some of the things that we look at as well. And
there was a lot of work that was taken in the development of this policy, and I just think that it's important for us to, for a brief moment, highlight all of the different action steps that were taken. The product that's in front of you today is the work of a lot of different members within our school community. And behind the words that are on the paper, there are so many individuals that had voice throughout. And so while you're hearing from our administrative team during this presentation, it really is reflective of so many valuable people within our school community and the collaboration in the development of this. And you see there were a lot of different action steps that we're taking from the collaboration I mentioned with CSE, but also we did surveys, we did a lot of public presentations throughout. We had focus groups, open community feedback sessions. We consulted with an outside expert, Dr. David Bateman, who has an expertise in special education and behavioral supports. And we also had extensive feedback and review through the policy committee of the board. We had board members who are gratefully very vested in the work, and so that was an important part of our process as well. You may be wondering, as you're listening to this presentation, why were these changes even necessary? The last time that this particular policy was reviewed was in 2012. We know that since that period of time, there have been a lot of changes, frankly, not just in education, but in our world. And so it's important to update this particular policy and make it more reflective of where we are today. Some of the things that we have seen within education that now get considered within this particular policy is the emphasis on trauma-sensitive practices and thinking about the importance of professional learning related to trauma-sensitive practices, the focus within education on social-emotional learning for all students, thinking about those tiers of intervention, multi-tiered systems of support, aligning it to other district practices, restorative practices, responsive classroom, positive behavior interventions and supports, and universal design for learning. We also have a greater awareness in education and focus on sensory integration, zones of regulation. We've also done a lot of work as the district related to risk and threat assessments. We have moved to utilizing QBS Safety Care as our training platform for teaching de-escalation strategies to staff in order to make sure we're appropriately supporting our students. And we've done a lot of work within the district on program development, particularly in the areas of autistic support and emotional support. So as you can see with this summary, there's a lot of ways that things have changed within education, and this update to the policy was important to be reflective of that. Throughout this presentation, as we talk about the updated policy, I just want to point out to you some of the changes. I'm not putting up a side-by-side comparison. There is a presentation that we presented in March of 2025 that you could go back and view that explains the policy at that time. Fast forward to today with our new policy. These are some of the highlighted changes. We really focused on expanding definitions, making sure that they were more comprehensive, really looking at embedding universal design for learning, thinking about how do we make a deliberate connection within the policy and administrative regulations to trauma-sensitive practices, how do we ensure that there's alignment with positive behavioral interventions and supports. You will see that there is a wider audience reflected in the training that is referenced within. Another positive move forward for the district is that the calming room that used to exist at Marion Elementary is no longer in place and has been eliminated. We've emphasized the importance of sensory and emotional regulation, and sensory and calming spaces are more recognized throughout. We also adjusted to parent notification of physical management procedures being required on the same day. And we require our teams to be debriefing after every use of physical management procedures to review the incident and problem solve as appropriate at that time. So you can see there's a lot of different changes that have come through in this work, and this just kind of highlights for you. I will say that the policy that was in place previously from 2012 was strong. There were a lot of good things within that. This is now just a greatly enhanced policy based on the things that are different within education and within our system. Now we're going to provide a brief overview of the updated policy and administrative regulations. If you would like to read the actual policy and administrative regulations, you can access those on the district's website under our policy section. On this slide, you can see the structure and organization of the policy and administrative regulations, and we're briefly going to touch upon each section. We recognize that it's a lot of content in a short period of time. I encourage you to reach out with questions. If you're listening to this presentation and you have questions specific to your child, you can reach out to your child's special education case manager, the building administration that supports at the school your student is attending, or the special education supervisor of the appropriate grade band. You can also reach out to the Office of Student Services if you have general questions about the policy and administrative regulations. Within the administrative regulations, you'll see a variety of different definitions that are clearly defined. We'll briefly highlight each of these, and again, you can refer to the specific administrative regulations for the definitions exactly as they are written. An assigned responsible employee refers to a district employee. This is someone who knows the student, has knowledge of a student's needs, and is trained to implement the positive behavioral supports. We've defined behavior as an action or reaction that encompasses both physical and verbal responses. All behaviors can be interpreted as a form of expressing feelings, needs, or thoughts. A calming zone or space means specifically a space within a special education classroom that's designed for students to receive direct instruction of social emotional skills and strategies, as well as a place for them to have opportunities to de-escalate or regulate emotions and behaviors in the least restrictive manner possible. We will talk about calming spaces a little bit further on in the presentation. Clear and present danger of imminent physical harm. This is really important because of the responsibility we have to ensuring a safe learning environment. In the context of the use of physical restraint as a last resort, means the student is acting in a manner as to be a clear and present danger of causing imminent physical harm to themselves or to another person. Imminent means about to happen, but is not yet happened. A student may be restrained before the student has actually caused harm. This does not include just simple non-compliance or damage to property that does not involve danger of physical injury as well. Environmental interventions or strategies are ways that an environment may be changed or adapted to support students to engage in desired behaviors. This may include, but it's not limited to, decreasing sensory input, creating a structured classroom routine, or removing known environmental triggers. Our emergency crisis response team includes special education team members and building level administrators who have been trained and certified in de-escalation and restraint practices to support students who are engaging in behaviors that present a clear and present danger of imminent physical harm. A functional behavior assessment, commonly referred to as an FBA, is an evaluation that aims to identify behaviors that may be interfering with the student's learning or the learning of others. We look at the underlying causes of those behaviors, how those behaviors impact the student or other students' ability to access their education. Consent for the district to complete a functional behavior assessment is provided to the district by the parents or guardians through a permission to evaluate or reevaluate form. An operational definition looks at what a behavior looks like. It doesn't define internal events such as feelings or intentions, but rather focuses on what is observable characteristics of a behavior. Positive behavior supports are for supporting students with disabilities who require specific interventions to address a behavior that interferes with their learning or the learning of others. The methods are inclusive of positive reinforcement, proactive interventions and strategies, environmental interventions and strategies to help support the shaping of a student's behavior, and really looks at teaching replacement behaviors and specific tangible reinforcement. A restraint and physical management procedure means the application of a physical intervention with or without the use of any device for the purpose of restraining the free movement of the student's body. The term does not include briefly holding without force a student to calm or comfort the student, to guide the student to an appropriate activity, or hold a student's hand to safely escort the student from one area to the other. It also does not include hand-over-hand assistance with feeding or task completion, and techniques prescribed by a qualified medical professional for reasons of safety or their therapeutic and medical treatment, as agreed to by the student's parents or guardians and detailed within a student's individualized education plan. Restraint and physical management procedures are only implemented as an absolute last resort, and only when necessary for the safety of students, for peers, and staff. Staff prioritize the dignity of the student and everyone else when there is a clear and present danger of imminent harm. A sensory space is a space inside or very close to a special education classroom that is designed for student use to facilitate sensory de-escalation and regulation. We will talk a little bit later in the presentation more about sensory spaces. Trauma-sensitive interventions include strategies for teaching individuals how to manage their emotions, how to regulate their behaviors, and to develop coping skills to navigate challenging situations. With trauma-sensitive interventions, creating a sense of safety and trust is essential, as individuals who've experienced trauma may be more sensitive to environmental cues and interactions. Providing clear expectations, predictable routines, and providing opportunities for emotional regulation are critical to address trauma-sensitive interventions. And Universal Design for Learning, UDL, is an educational framework that aspires to ensure that teaching methods, materials, and assessments are accessible and effective for all learners, regardless of their abilities, background, and learning environments. The next section highlights intervention rationale. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, there is a connection to Policy 235, Student Rights and Responsibilities. It is important to note here that if a student is deemed to be an eligible student under the PA School Code Chapter 14 regulations, the student's rights and responsibilities is followed to the extent that the eligible student's right to a free and appropriate public education, which includes special education and services, is not violated. A student's disability does not automatically preclude the student from disciplinary consequences associated within Policy 235, but consideration must be given to whether and how a student's disability impacted the policy violation. An IEP meeting can be called at any time to discuss additional supports and structures that might be necessary for a student's success. Positive techniques are utilized for the development, change, and maintenance of target behaviors. And as mentioned previously, we look at less restrictive strategies before we do more intrusive strategies. If at any point in any stage of intervention, the strategies and environmental modifications are unsuccessful at supporting the student, the IEP team will convene to determine if additional strategies are warranted. It's important to note that families, parents, and guardians can request an IEP meeting at any time to review the behavioral supports that are provided to their child. This section also highlights the fact that restraints or physical management procedures may only be used in emergency situations that involve imminent danger, as we've discussed. If the use of restraints is anticipated as part of a behavior support plan, it must be explicitly included within the IEP and documented within a notice of recommended placement or prior written notice to obtain written parental or guardian consent. Within the intervention rationale, you will also see a list of aversive techniques. Aversive techniques are techniques of handling behavior that are considered inappropriate at all phases of intervention and are strictly prohibited. It's important to note that the list of aversive techniques that you will see within the administrative regulations is taken directly from PA school code. Training is also highlighted within the administrative regulations, again, emphasizing the importance of collective responsibility. This is about professional learning that's provided not just to our special education team members, but also other staff that are responsible for implementing this policy in supporting behavior regulation, positive behavior support, and de-escalation strategies. This includes our classroom teachers, related service providers, our transportation team members, building administrators, and our instructional assistants. The training that is provided will be tiered based on the role of the team members, and it emphasizes establishing instructional environments that really promote student self-regulation of behavior, with the goal of reducing the need for restraints. This also includes not just the training that's provided during the dedicated professional learning time, it also includes our ongoing support and consultation by designated team members. We are fortunate to have the support of 5 board-certified behavior analysts within the district who provide that ongoing support and consultation to teams. We're going to highlight briefly in the next couple slides the 4 stages of intervention so you can get a sense of what's included within each. Again, specific information about each stage of intervention can be found within the administrative regulation. Stage 1 is our universal design for learning and environmental interventions and strategies. The way to think about this is really higher level. It's about the whole classroom. It's about what's in place for all students, what's embedded within the classroom, what's embedded within the school that is accessible to all students. They are positive classroom strategies. It's non-intrusive and again applies to all students. This is where we see best teaching practices, classroom management techniques that can create an atmosphere that supports with the prevention of behaviors. The list of strategies connected to Stage 1 can be found within the administrative regulations, but to give you an idea of what's included, this includes our promoting a community of respect, and that's connected to responsive classroom and restorative practices. It's about creating a purposeful structure to the environment with a predictable routine that students can count on to the degree possible. It's also about clearly defining classroom rules and expectations in a way that's accessible to all of the students in that classroom. These are just some examples, but not an exhaustive list of the strategies that are included within Stage 1. Stage 1 also includes the intentionally designed spaces within special education classrooms that support sensory integration and social and emotional regulation. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail in upcoming slides. It's just important to note for here that staff receive training and strategies on how to successfully use these spaces and tools to best support our students. And to that end, all school teams have consultation opportunities with the occupational therapist to support with regulation. For Stage 1 strategies, there's no formal written records or documentation within the IEP. While Stage 1 interventions do not require formal IEP documentation, staff are encouraged to maintain informal behavior logs or anecdotal notes to support potential IEP team discussions should further intervention be required. Stage 2 are our positive behavioral strategies. Again, you can refer to the administrative regulations for the list of specific strategies, but by way of example, this may include environmental modifications, such as changing seating or reducing visual distractions. It might also be about the presentation of material, extended time to complete tests or tasks, modifying the task demands for a particular student, or specified use of technology. These are positive strategies that present little intrusion. They're proactive and designed to support a student's expected behavior. Again, while they're primarily intended to be proactive, they may also be responsive measures to support a student exhibiting a behavior that interferes with their learning or learning of others. The sensory spaces and tools for students are documented within an IEP, discussed at an IEP team meeting, and approved by parents or guardians through a notice of recommended placement. It's important to note that these sensory spaces and tools are always monitored and supported by an adult and may be used either on a predetermined schedule or as needed upon student request. Again, that's going to be very specific to an individual student and is clearly defined within their IEP. Stage 2 also gives information about calming zones and spaces. Similar to our sensory spaces, these are intentionally designed spaces within the special education classroom that are designated space where students can receive their direct instruction in social emotional skills and strategies. It also provides a safe place for students to be able to receive their non-contingent breaks, to access when they are experiencing frustration or dysregulation so that they can implement those strategies, again, always under the support and monitoring of an adult. Stage 3 is the development of a positive behavior support plan. If a student continues to demonstrate behaviors that interfere with their own learning or the learning of others, despite the use of strategies in stages 1 and 2, we may move to doing a functional behavior assessment. The results of that assessment are then used in the development of a positive behavior support plan. Positive behavior support plans are highly individualized based on the targeted behavior of concern, as well as the skills that are needed for students to develop positive behaviors to replace the behaviors of concern. These are positive measures. Aversive techniques, restraints or physical management procedures, and discipline are not used as a substitute for a positive behavior support plan. Also included within the positive behavior support plan is the defining of those target behaviors, but also a collection of data so that we can ensure that the interventions that are being put into place specifically for that student are effective in increasing positive behaviors and thereby allowing a student to access their education and make meaningful progress towards their goals. Stage 4 are the crisis management procedures. Stage 4 procedures are only utilized when a student is acting in a manner that is determined to be a clear and present danger of imminent physical harm to themselves or to others. This can be employed before the harm actually occurs. It never involves force or results in seclusion. As part of our crisis management procedures, we require that the school team attempts to notify the student's parents or guardians by phone and or email the day that the physical management procedure actually takes place. We also require that a licensed nurse examines the student who was restrained, as well as any other person that was potentially injured in the restraint episode. We look for that assessment to occur immediately if possible, but in any event, prior to the potentially injured person leaving for the day. School team members involved, including a building administrator, are required to hold a debriefing meeting on the same day if possible, but no later than one school day following the use of a restraint or physical management procedure. The team is required to review the incident, discuss necessary supportive student measures, and think about all of those that might have been involved or impacted and put supports in place. This includes considering supports in place for students who may have witnessed the restraint occurring. There is also a report that's required to be provided to the Pennsylvania Department of Education's Bureau of Special Education, and there are set guidelines that PDE requires of districts. I will note here that the Office of Children and Youth, OCY, does not consider the use of physical management procedures when done in accordance with the training and this administrative regulation to trigger mandated reporting of child abuse. Throughout this discussion of Stage 4 procedures, you hear me using both the language of restraints and physical management procedures. To be clear, it's the same thing. Restraints are physical management procedures, and physical management procedures are restraints. Just want you to get used to hearing both terms, as you may hear those described by the team. The use of a restraint or physical management procedure will then require that the IEP team convenes within 10 school days of the use of that restraint. Parents or guardians are invited to this IEP team meeting and are critical team members. At that IEP team meeting, the team is reviewing the student's individualized education plan, or IEP, and really considering what changes need to be made. It might include updated assessment, perhaps a functional behavior assessment or a reevaluation. It might include revisions to the positive behavior support plan, or lead to a discussion about a change in placement due to the unsafe behaviors. Again, parents and guardians are an important part of this IEP team and the IEP team discussion. Parents and guardians are invited to share any documentation regarding contraindications that a child has to restraint for consideration by the full IEP team. The use of restraints or physical management procedures may only be included in a student's IEP if the restraint is utilized with specific component elements of positive behavior support and are utilized in conjunction with instruction in acceptable positive behaviors that we'd like to see replace the behaviors of concern. Only staff who are trained are authorized to use the restraint procedures and receive annual training related to the safe use of restraints. The use of restraints can only be included in an IEP when there is a clear plan in place for the elimination of the use of restraints through the application of positive behavior support. As we conclude this overview of the policy and administrative regulations, and specifically Stage 4 interventions, I just want to highlight in conclusion again that we only use Stage 4 interventions if a student is presenting as a clear danger of imminent physical harm to themselves or to others. It's really about that responsibility of ensuring the safety of the individual student and the individuals who are around the student at the time they are demonstrating the behavior. We may need to employ district practices such as our risk assessment procedures or our threat assessment procedures, or lean into the support of community resources such as mental health professionals or emergency services, depending on the individual circumstances of the event. I know that this was a high-level overview and a lot of content. Again, I will refer you to the district's website where you can read the policy and administrative regulations that go into much more detail. For the remainder of this presentation, we also just wanted to take a few moments to share what work has been done since the adoption of the new policy and administrative regulations. The work didn't end with policy development. There were a lot of steps that were necessary to take to ensure that the policy is being implemented appropriately and that the policy is best supporting our students. As we go through the next slide, you're going to hear a little bit about how Policy 236 is in action.
Policy 236 ensures that every school provides universal sensory spaces and tools that support all students. These sensory spaces are embedded throughout the buildings. so they are easily accessible when students need them. The exact setup may look different at each school, depending on factors like the building layout and grade levels they serve. Examples of these supports include items like trampolines, wall or floor decals that encourage movement, positive affirmation signs, flexible seating options, and hands-on manipulatives that help students regulate and stay engaged in learning. Teams have really taken an initiative to build their classrooms and environment toolkits with sensory-friendly materials and items that support regulation. In partnership with the ISC and the curriculum department, many staff put forward sensory and social and emotional material ISC grant requests this school year. And together, ISC, Student Services, and the curriculum department were able to make sure all requests were honored. One example is that a request from one kindergarten classroom teacher to incorporate a sensory corner turned into sensory corners for all of the kindergarten classrooms. In partnership from Student Services and the curriculum team, this was able to happen. This slide highlights how Policy 236 supports students with IEPs using sensory spaces and sensory tools. These supports are designed to help meet a variety of student needs, including executive functioning, social, emotional, physical, and behavioral needs. Sensory breaks can help students regulate their bodies, refocus, and return to learning more successfully. For students with IEPs, the use of sensory supports must be discussed during the IEP meeting and include important input from parents or guardians. If the team determines that sensory breaks or tools are appropriate, then together they will be incorporated into the student's program. When implementing sensory supports, there are several important guidelines to follow. Students should always be monitored by an adult while using these spaces or tools. The sensory break may occur based on a scheduled time or when a student requests it, depending on the plan developed by the IEP team. It is also important for staff to track how often the sensory supports are used and review that data weekly to ensure that supports are helping the student and to determine if adjustments are needed. This slide explains what a calming zone or calming space is and how it supports students with IEPs. A calming zone is a designated area within a special education classroom where students can go to regulate their emotions and behaviors. The goal is to provide a safe and supportive environment where students can practice social, emotional skills and learn strategies to help them de-escalate when they are feeling overwhelmed. These spaces are not meant to be punitive. Instead, they are instructional and supportive. Students can use the space to practice identifying their emotions, using coping strategies, and regaining control so that they can return to their learning. There are several key features that make calming zones effective. First, they are designed with input from the student's IEP team, including families, to ensure the supports match the student's individual needs. The space must always be supervised by an adult to ensure safety and provide guidance when needed. Calming zones can be used proactively, such as when a student recognizes that they need a break, or responsively when a student is beginning to escalate. The tools within the space, such as flexible seating, sensory items, calming visuals, or headphones, are selected to match the sensory and emotional needs of the student. The overall goal is to help students build self-regulation skills that support both their well-being and their ability to participate successfully in learning.
At the beginning of each school year, each of our 11 schools are tasked with creating their own Team 236. Team 236 is made up of staff members who are safety care trained, and we ask that each of those teams consist of at least 2 building administrators, select instructional assistants, select behavior aides, select special education teachers, and a board-certified behavior analyst, or BCBA. So why do we have Team 236? Team 236 is in place to support students whose behaviors may interfere with learning or safety. And that could be the learning or safety of themselves, or that could be the learning or safety of other students. And then what does Team 236 do? Team 236 provides direct support for students who are exhibiting escalating behaviors and ensures a safe learning environment for all students. The second thing that Team 236 does is they are the only team members in the school building who are able to utilize physical management procedures if they need to be used in a situation. And then the third thing that Team 236 does is to provide ongoing consultation, support, and training for other staff members on behavioral, social, and emotional strategies so that they're able to implement those with other students in the school building. In our district, we're very lucky to have 5 BCBAs across the district, and all of them are members of our building-based Team 236 teams. And their role on those teams is to support behavior intervention at the building level. They work really closely with our building administration and with myself and our other supervisors of special education. They review new or revised positive behavior support plans with Team 236 members at a monthly Team 236 meeting. And the BCBA also provides ongoing training and guidance on safety care strategies, and they also help develop Team 236 members as behavioral leaders within the building. Each month, each of our Team 236 teams across the district meets to collaborate, to review data, and discuss behavioral supports for students. Each of these meetings might include a wellness check-in for each of the team members, an opportunity for the team to reflect on different events that happened during that month, a time for the team to discuss any changes that the team needs to make as how they function within the school building, and then also to review updates or revised behavior plans. During these meetings, the BCBA also facilitates a brief professional learning that's really focused on a particular behavior strategy that they want to focus on for that particular month. And each Team 236 focuses on the same monthly topic for a particular month. We focus on a particular behavioral strategy with the goal that Team 236 is able to strengthen behavioral support practices across the entire school. And this is part of that development of behavioral leaders within the school building. The topics that we focused on this year are regulation, positive reinforcement, antecedent versus consequence strategies, differential reinforcement, prompting, de-escalation, behavioral skills training, active student responding, structured reinforcement systems, and data collection.
This slide summarizes information about Policy 236 Professional Learning Plan in action. The policy requires that an annual professional learning plan be created for designated staff responsible for implementing the policy. The plan also requires that training be evaluated. Because it's our belief that many staff support positive behavior, the professional learning plan has a wide reach, including building administrators, general and special education teachers, student services staff, aides, office staff, and transportation staff. Our belief is also that context matters. So while there is a core message within each training, there's also time to filter how that core message relates to specific roles and looks across different school settings. It's important to note that training can be extended outside of the actual session through job-embedded support and consultation with each school building's Team 236, of which a board-certified behavior analyst is part. It's also important to note that we did not want professional learning about topics in the policy to feel siloed. So it was designed to connect to other district priorities such as well-being, belonging, restorative practices, and universal design for learning. This slide highlights information about the professional learning topics for all staff this school year. Those topics are trauma-informed care in school, positive behavior and de-escalation strategies, and promoting student self-regulation. The trauma-informed care training was held in November and led by Doctors Walker and Graziosi-Hibbs, who are student services supervisors. The Behavior Basics presentation in February was facilitated by District Board Certified Behavior Analysts. The Universal Sensory Spaces and Tools training will be held in May. The identified learning targets you see on the slide serve as the takeaways from each training and are used in evaluation of them.
Thank you for listening through this presentation. We hope that it provided useful information. Again, we know that it's a lot of content and that it might be a lot to process everything. Please know that you're not in this alone, that we are here as resources for you, and that there are team members that you can reach out to if you have questions. If you have questions that are specific to your individual child, maybe you have questions about your child's IEP, maybe you have questions about the behaviors that you're seeing, or questions about the behavior supports that are in place for your child, your first contact would be your child's special education case manager. Parents and guardians have the right to call an IEP team meeting at any time. You can make that request to your child's special education case manager. You can also use the school administrator at the school where your child attends or the appropriate supervisor of special education if you have questions. For general questions about the policy itself, you can contact the Office of Student Services at 610-645-1918 or any members of the Student Services Administrative Team, and we'll be glad to answer questions you have. Thank you again for joining us. We look forward to continue work within the community related to this very important topic of positive behavior supports for our students receiving special education services.